All right, let's get right into it. You know, when you think about the war in Ukraine, what comes to mind? Probably tanks, trenches, maybe drones, right? But there's this whole other war happening right over our heads, a silent digital fight in orbit. And today, we're going to break down this incredible story of how a clever cyber sting flipped a superpower's most prized tech right back on them. So here's the big question. How do you actually take an entire army offline? Not with a missile, not with a bomb, but by hitting them where they're most vulnerable. That desperate need for a connection. This is exactly how a group of Ukrainian hacktivists did it. Okay, so this whole thing was basically a trap built on pure desperation. See, Russian forces had gotten their hands on smuggled Starlink terminals, the high-speed satellite internet from SpaceX. But then Ukraine and SpaceX started cracking down, and suddenly these units just went dark. So what happened? Ukrainian hacktivists jumped on this. They set up these fake Telegram bots with a really simple promise. Hey, pay us a small fee, give us your Starlink serial number, and we'll get you back online. And the Russian soldiers, desperate for that signal, they walked right into it. And the sheer scale of this, it's just mind-blowing. We're talking about data harvested from 2,420 Russian Starlink terminals. Just think about that. This wasn't just a few guys getting caught. We're talking about a huge chunk of their frontline communication network totally and completely compromised. And what they got was so much more than just a list of serial numbers. It was an absolute digital goldmine. They snagged the exact GPS coordinates of Russian command posts. They funneled over $5,000 in so-called fees straight into the Ukrainian Defense Forces budget. And get this, they even ID'd 31 local collaborators in the process. Incredible. So the endgame here was a brilliant two-punch combo. First, they used those GPS coordinates for immediate artillery and drone strikes. I mean, if you can see the terminal, you can hit the command post. Simple as that. But the second part was the real killer. They took all those serial numbers to SpaceX and had them remotely disable the hardware, literally turning it into a useless piece of plastic. They actually called it putting the terminals into brick mode. And all of this begs a massive question, right? Why on earth was a military superpower, a country with this legendary space program, forced to rely on a smuggled American consumer product, a product from their biggest rival, no less? Well, the answer to that, it pulls back the curtain on a really deep strategic weakness. You see, it all comes down to a critical vulnerability for Russia, a real Achilles heel. Their problem isn't a lack of ambition in space or anything like that. It's this massive, glaring gap between what they can do and what their adversaries can do, especially when it comes to satellites. Just take a look at these numbers. It says it all. The United States has, over 3,400 satellites whizzing around up there. China, over 450. And Russia, just 172. And the thing is, a lot of those are old, way past their expiration date. They're a distant third in a race where, frankly, being first gives you this overwhelming advantage. And this is exactly why that numbers gap matters on the battlefield. Russia's own satellite systems, things like Gonets and Meridian, they're just dated. We're talking low bandwidth, high latency, that super frustrating delay you get on a bad video call? That's not going to cut it in modern warfare, especially when you're trying to control drones in real time. Starlink, though? It's the complete opposite. It gives them exactly what they were missing: high-speed, low-latency internet pretty much anywhere. They didn't just want it, they desperately needed it. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Russia's own experts are admitting it. A top researcher at their Space Research Institute basically said that Western satellites are providing this constant 24/7 stream of intelligence, while Russia's can only grab a quick snapshot a few times a day. That is a huge capability gap, and believe me, they know it. Which brings us to this really fascinating disconnect. On one hand, Russia has some of the most advanced military theories in the world about space warfare. But on the other hand, the reality for soldiers on the ground, well, it tells a very, very different story. If you look at their official documents, their military thinkers are talking about orbital satellite battles and anti-space operations. They see space as the ultimate high ground. Their whole strategy is about winning by knocking out the enemy's digital infrastructure from orbit. I mean, it's this grand sweeping vision of 21st century war. But then, you see this. And this is the reality. A Russian soldier is literally wrestling with this bulky, clunky, old-school satellite system called the OODA. So when your official plan calls for epic space battles, but your guys are stuck using gear like this, you've got a serious problem. And that's the problem that pushes them to the black market for stuff like Starlink. Okay, so let's go back to the front lines. After the hack and the big crackdown, what actually happened when thousands of these smuggled terminals just went dead? So everything really came to a boil in February. First, reports started popping up that Russia was integrating Starlink directly into its attack drones. For Ukraine, that was a huge red line. So their defense minister goes public and asks SpaceX to block all these unregistered terminals. And pretty soon after, a new Whitelist system comes online, and just like that, for the Russian forces, the lights went out. The fallout was immediate, and it was severe. Without Starlink, Russian units had serious trouble coordinating with each other. Their command and their entire logistics system got thrown into chaos. And most critically, their ability to operate their drones, their eyes in the sky, was seriously compromised. The one piece of tech they had become so dependent on was just gone. So what about their own systems? Could they just switch back? Well, we actually know the answer to that, because Ukrainian intelligence intercepted calls from Russian soldiers trying to use Gazprom's satellite system. And their verdict? The connection was, and I'm quoting them directly here, practically impossible to use in combat. There was no plan B. And what this whole episode really shows us is something fundamental about how war is changing, the age-old fight for the high ground. While it isn't just for superpowers with giant space programs anymore, now is being fought and won by clever hacktivists, by commercial tech companies, and by nations that understand how to weaponize access to information itself. This is a huge shift. The power to control the digital battlefield is becoming just as decisive as controlling the physical one. And that really leaves us with one final big question to chew on. In this new era, where armies literally run on data, what's the most powerful weapon? Is it the one you can build and launch? Or is it the one you can just turn off?